the November 17th, 2020 meeting of Ag and Rural Affairs. The first item on the agenda is approval of minutes of the October 20th meeting. Are there any additions, corrections, or deletions? Hearing none, do we have a motion?
Yeah, I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second by George. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
That's two that are in favor. Is anyone
Aye.
else in favor?
Aye.
Oh, okay, great. Motion passes. Item 3, public appearances for non-agenda items. Jeff, I think you're here for an agenda item, so seeing no one else here, we'll move on to agenda review. Wade is remote. Wade, anything on the agenda review?
No proposed changes.
Okay, thanks, Wade. Agenda items, 5A, agricultural accessory related uses in city agricultural zoning districts. I'm going to turn this over to Wade for the staff report. Jeff, do you want to speak after the staff report? Sure, okay, sounds good. Go ahead, Wade.
Just to confirm, folks can hear me okay?
Yes,
Okay, so I will share my screen. And Scott, Yarborough, I assume folks at City Hall can see my screen, is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, so just bear with me here, let me size this. Okay, so I think this is our third meeting discussing potential changes to our ag zoning districts, and had a lot of good discussion thus far. I guess the goal tonight would be to have one last kick at this, at these changes, and then potentially look at maybe making a motion to approve these changes, and then it'll go up the food chain to Plan Commission, and then to council as well. So that's kind of my goal, and certainly if we don't get there tonight, that's fine, but that's, maybe we'll work towards that end. So with that in mind, I'm on page 6 of the packet. So again, I think you guys have seen this, a few iterations of this memo. This is based on conversations over the past 2 meetings. So again, first off, we're starting with definitions as it relates to some of these potential changes. I did add a couple definitions that I think will help clarify the conversation we'll have tonight. I added the definition of accessory, which essentially means a use that's secondary to a primary or principal use on a lot. Agricultural use, so I'm not proposing any changes to that definition. Agricultural use, you've seen that definition, I think 3 times now. Again, no proposed changes there. Moving on to page 7 of the packet. Agricultural accessory use, again, you've seen this definition before, no proposed changes there. Moving down the page, ag-related uses, again, you've seen this definition, no proposed changes. Ag entertainment, you've seen this definition in the black text. I am proposing a change to that based on the conversation we had last time. If you remember, we kind of took a vote on what the committee thinks in terms of how should these ag entertainment uses be defined. So essentially what I did is I added the word accessory to a principal agricultural use. And I think what I want to do is just kind of unpack this definition a little bit. So starting off with the idea of it being farm-based, that essentially means that the ag entertainment activity needs to be based on a farm. And if you look at the definition just below ag entertainment, that is the definition of farm. We'll get to that. But I don't think you guys have seen that definition before. That's again in our existing code, but I don't think you've seen that definition in the memo. So essentially a farm is all land under common ownership that is primarily devoted to ag use. And again, we've defined ag use on the previous page. So again, it's a farm-based activity which combines the elements and characteristics of agriculture and tourism. And I think that's another key point. It really is again, combining not just the tourist idea, but an agricultural idea as well. So I think that's very, very important to point out. And again, what I did add here was the idea of a accessory use to a principal agricultural use. And then everything else essentially remains the same. Again, per our discussion last time, the committee was agreeable to both an existing or a potential new building to house an ag entertainment activity. So that was already reflected in the current definition. And then we just go on to give some various examples of ag entertainment uses. And then I think what's also very important in this definition is this last phrase, and similar activities which are related to agriculture. Again, I think the key point here is a relation to agriculture. So again, that's a very important phrase there. So I think what I'll do is I'll get through all these definitions, proposed changes, then we can go back and pick at them. So again, moving on to the next definition of farm, not proposing any changes there. Again, that's from our current ordinance. Principal, again, not proposing any changes to that. I think you guys haven't seen that definition yet, but again, given the wording that we just talked about with the ag entertainment definition, I thought it made sense to include this definition as for context as well. So for that, maybe before we move into the specific use changes, I guess it would probably make sense to just talk a little bit more about these definitions. And again, the only change I'm proposing based on committee discussion is, again, that phrase of secondary or accessory to a primary principal agricultural use. So that could certainly, I guess, open it up for discussion.
Any thoughts? Are we okay with changes as drafted by Wade, or anything in particular anyone wants to discuss? Nope. Nope. I think we're good, Wade.
Okay. So moving into kind of the second piece of the puzzle here is this idea of how this relates to our specific uses in our districts. But before we get to that, I do just want to quickly touch on this idea of the size parameters in our 3 ag districts. So again, I'm on page 7 of the packet, about midway down. So again, we have 3 ag districts: exclusive agriculture, which is our large scale ag lots, 35 acres or greater. We've got our transitional agriculture, which essentially doesn't have any size parameters. It's kind of open-ended. So the question there would be, do we need to develop size parameters for that transitional ag district, or do we just leave it as is? To be honest, as a staff person, I'm somewhat indifferent to changing it. I could see going either way. But I think if there is a discussion on creating some size parameters for that district, it might make sense to look at the next district, our small lot ag, for some guidance. Essentially meaning that our small lot ag, which again houses smaller ag activities, our minimum lot size there is 3 acres. So kind of what that's telling me is that the minimum lot size the city is favorable to as it relates to ag uses would be about 3 acres. So if the committee does want to explore developing size parameters for that transitional ag district, a potential recommendation would be a 3 acre minimum and then no maximum on the lot size. And maybe before we get to that one specifically, I'll just run through all the other changes, then we can go back and talk about all these proposed changes. So moving on to the next part of the page here, now we're getting into kind of the uses in our ag districts. And again, we kind of group them by category. So the first use category would be ag accessory uses. And again, we've discussed much of this. So the only change I'm proposing, again, based on committee discussion, is adding the word solar panels to this number B. So essentially it's saying a wind tower, solar panels, or manure digester to serve a single farm. Now that solar panel wording would be in addition to 2 of the ag districts, ag exclusive and ag transition. and it would be a brand new use in our ag small. So again, we're just adding the wording to the ag exclusive and ag transition districts, and then adding that whole phrase, that whole number B, or letter B, to the ag small district. So that's, I guess, proposed change number 2. Again, the first change was the ag entertainment definition. Everything else as relates to permitted uses that are considered ag accessory remain the same. Now we're getting into conditional ag accessory uses. This would be proposed change number 3. I'm on the top of page 8. And this, again, we've talked about, but this would be the idea that folks can now, with this change, sell products on their farm that are created on their farm. So you look at Apple Garden as an example. If they're making cider, at their farm from the apples that they grow on the farm, they can sell that cider on the farm. So that would be proposed change number 3. Again, and that would be added to all ag districts, the 3 ag districts, ag exclusive, ag transition, and ag small. So that's a proposed change. And then the next change in that conditional use category would be, again, ag entertainment. So what this is proposing is putting a size, allowing for additional attendance for ag entertainment uses in the ag small district. Now, as it currently stands, our code caps attendance for ag entertainment in our ag small district at 150 people at one time during the day, which I understand that's probably because that was originally proposed because ag small lots are smaller lots. So if we get, a lot of people there at one time, that could create some scenarios. But in my head, as we talked about last time, you could have an ag small lot that's 34 acres in size, very similar to an ag exclusive lot. And the ag exclusive lots allow a much higher attendance cap. So what this is saying is that as a conditional use, meaning this committee and the plan commission would have to approve a use under this proposal, but potentially a ag small lot could have an ag entertainment activity with more than 150 people. Again, that would be a condition of use that this body would approve. So that's change number 4. And I just have one more change, and then again, we can go back and pick at these. Change 5 would be, again, under this category of ag-related uses. Again, conditional uses, meaning this body, as well as the plan commission, would review and approve these types of uses. So they're not just uses by right, but they are required to have city approvals. And this would be this idea of a processing facility. So again, if somebody wants to can salsa or do some sort of processing activity on a farm that's of a certain scale or size, it would be allowed as a conditional use. And again, strictly related to agriculture, and byproducts thereof. So that would be change number 5. And again, this would be added to all 3 of our ag districts. So with that, I think that is all I have. Again, 5 changes. And then I guess one outstanding issue, meaning what is the committee's interest in exploring size parameters for transition ag, or do we just leave it as is? So with that, again, I'm certainly open to any questions or comments the committee might have.
Wade, do we actually, thank you. Wade, do we actually have any AT lots that are less than 3 acres?
Yeah, I did do a quick check. We do have I think some 1.5 acre lots.
Oh.
So they are out there.
What are the committee's thoughts on that? The question as to whether there would be size parameters stated for the AT district for these permitted or conditional uses.
So is there some sort of exception for those lots that are already existing, and then we would apply that to moving forward, because I'm sure those people won't be very thrilled if their acre and a half lots are now being re-evaluated.
Well, I think, so, to clarify, Wade, I don't think we're suggesting that they would be rezoned. This is just a matter of whether, of those lots that are in the AT district, whether these permitted uses or conditional uses would be allowed to occur on those properties, whether there would be approvals for that if they're under 3 acres.
Yep, and you were cutting out at a little bit, I hope my connection is okay, but yeah, Amy, to your point, that essentially what would happen is if we do create size parameters, those lots would not be rezoned, they would just be considered what we call prior non-conforming. And the idea would be as we move forward, we just wouldn't rezone to AT below a 3 acre minimum.
Okay, thanks for the clarification, Wade.
Wade, give us an example of an AT situation.
Yeah, and that's where, again, it's more of a housekeeping issue. I mean, I guess the only scenario would be is, so basically what we say with AT is that anything you can do under AX, you can do under AT. So, you know, if we get these 1.5 acre lots, I don't know if it's a slippery slope towards like creating rural residential lots. I don't know. At some point we might be, what's the expression? A solution in search of a problem. I don't know if this is problematic. I don't know. I've been here 8 years. I don't know of any issues, but I guess the scenario would be is there any issues that the committee has in creating very, very small, potentially very, very small ag lots, under this zoning designation?
Well, we wouldn't create any new AT lots anyhow, so it's simply a matter of whether these uses would be allowed on a lot that was under 3 acres. And I'm not sure that I necessarily see an issue with that.
Backing up, and why wouldn't we create any new ag transition lots?
That's been the city's policy, that we're trying to get away from all AT lots, and everything would be zoned either AX or AS. So if a new lot were being created that was going to be agriculture, it would be AS if it's under 35 acres and not AT. So we're only really talking about what would be allowed on existing AT lots, which is why I asked whether there actually were any that are under 3 acres. But you've indicated that there are a couple.
Yeah, so backing up, Ed, I guess I wasn't aware of that. I apologize. I didn't know that was our policy. To be honest, I'm glad to hear that, because what I was also, as I was doing the research on this, what I was also proposing was essentially making the AT district a dead zoning district, meaning we don't rezone to it anymore, but it sounds like that's already
Yeah,
our
we did
policy.
that.
Is that
Yep.
kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, I mean, if that's the case, and again, I wasn't aware of that, I think we just leave everything as is. That would be staff's recommendation.
Yeah.
Okay, so if there's an acre and a half lot, they could still put one of these uses on there, or come to us with one of these conditional uses if they wanted to,
Right.
and no one thinks that's an issue? Okay. Okay, so I don't think we need the minimum on there. Wade?
Yep, no, I agree, thanks.
I had a question with regard to, more of a clarification with regard to adding the solar panels down in the permitted uses in B. Yeah, I mean, I think technically this could be read 2 different ways. When you say wind tower, solar panels, or manure digester to serve a single farm, is the intent that all 3 of those things would be allowed as long as they're to serve a single farm? That modifier applies to all 3.
Correct.
Someone could read that differently, that the single farm only applies to the manure digester, which is the last thing in the sentence there, and say that the wind tower or solar panels are a permitted use for purposes that wouldn't be to serve a single farm, and I think we should clarify that.
Yep.
If that's the
we can do
intent.
that.
What would you propose to clarify it?
I guess you could reverse the wording in the sentence and you could say, the following uses are permitted to serve a single farm: wind tower, solar panels, or manure digester. Then it could not be read any other way. Does that make sense?
Could also do the and/or.
Yeah, and I can look for other wording in our code that, maybe that we could just mirror that for consistency, that'll make that very clear.
Yeah, and/or might do it also. Yeah, however you want to do it, Wade, as long as we're all
Yep.
have the same understanding of what the intent is.
Yep.
Okay.
I've got a question on this. You're talking about serving a single farm. What about the situation that we got going on right now where that is not serving a single farm? It's a municipal thing.
Yep, that's already allowed. That's allowed in our AX district under, I think there's like a utility, kind of a blanket language from state statute. So that currently is allowed.
Okay.
That's permitted or that's conditional?
Permitted.
Ed, you would probably know better than I. Did that come before Plan Commission as a conditional use, or do you remember?
It came before Plan Commission. If it's permitted use, I don't know why it would have,
Right, so then I guess it would be.
other than for architectural and design review, perhaps. I thought it was a conditional use. And
Yeah,
this,
and some
and
of
this,
that
this
stuff, our
section
hands
is for
are kind of at the
that's what I
local
thought,
level,
yeah.
because a lot of that's written into state statute as it relates to, energy utilities. But, whatever we're required to do per law, and, we did, and, yeah, it probably was a conditional use, yep.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is.
I think it was conditional, right?
Yeah.
But this is permitted, Raj.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
And really where I'm coming from on this, if you take a certain amount of your farmland and put solar panels on that are gonna feed your farm, but anything surplus is gonna go to the grid, and which is usually the way most of them are set up. I don't want the assessing department to be able to block that out and say that's not agricultural land.
And that, Mark, that really gets out of, that's really not a zoning issue. They assess based on state statute. I can bring up that question to Amy, but,
But that's my point in that is, we need to know, because if the assessing department is gonna come in and block that out, or if that makes the difference in being able to stay agricultural, I think we should have the right to put that on there, because it's a crop that's produced on that land.
Now, that's got to be taken up with Amy. Because I hear what you're saying. You're going to get, it is a crop. It's no different than corn and soybeans on the
Exactly.
land. That's what you're saying.
Exactly.
And I agree with you. You do not want to go into a different tax category because of its use.
That's why we have to spell it out.
But I think, Mark, this is something that Amy has to look at. I don't think we're in a position to do anything on it.
All I'm saying is if it's an allowed use from our end of it, because it's allowed on state law, under state law. So,
Well, I think the key to what you're saying, and don't want to drag it out, but it's a crop.
yep.
I mean,
That was my point.
It's
Yeah,
a
totally.
crop, so it would fall under the categories of,
It should, and if you need to get clarification, Wade, great.
What you're saying, Mark, is that it could be assessed at use value at a lot higher rate.
Well, we certainly
Is
saw
that,
a lot of things
that's
happen
what
this
we
year.
want to avoid?
Yes.
But if it's just serving the single farm, then it's no different than a silo or anything else that you
Right.
might build on the
Yeah.
farm, and that shouldn't,
Yes, it is
then
different.
it's an ag accessory use.
It is different because your buildings and if you have a farm and you decide to put buildings up, you have the option of using the sky blue shed. And we have some people, you know them, your neighbors, who instead of building a building, because they couldn't or didn't, use the sky blue shed. It's a big shed, a lot of room. And everything just sits out there. That land that stuff is sitting on is considered agricultural land. But if you put a building on it, that's taxed differently. So the sky blue shed is taxed differently than the red shed that you put your equipment in. That's my point. So we have to make sure that, because that solar electricity, yes, you're using it for your house, but it can go on the grid, and a lot of times it does go on the grid first. So I think we have to clarify that, to make sure that our people know what they're getting into, because you're seeing more and more of this. I want to make sure that it's taxed right. So if Wade has to go to Amy, that's great, but I think we have to ask those questions.
Does Amy's answer to that change your opinion as to whether this should be in here?
And if I could just clarify a point too, these are just allowable uses. These aren't things that landowners have to do. So again, it's really granting freedom to the landowner, whether or not they choose to take the use up and be taxed accordingly. That's their call.
But I think we need to know where it falls.
I think it would be nice to know the answer to the question, but for the purposes of this discussion here today, does it change your opinion as to whether or not this should be in here?
In here.
I mean,
It could.
so if Amy says, no, that's going to change the taxes, then you'd say you wouldn't want this in here as a permitted
Well, I would
use?
say that then then we need to change the wording so that someone knows what they're facing when they're doing that.
I mean, that would be the same potentially with any building that you would build that would then become taxable if you build a processing facility. I mean, any of the things that might be a permitted or conditional use, if they involve putting up a building, it's going to change the taxes.
It could.
And I don't know that we're
It could. And what I'm
trying
saying
to
is,
warn everybody about that with every
what I'm
possible.
saying is if you decide to put solar up, it shouldn't, because that's creating a product.
Well, what about wind? Is it any different?
No, see, either one.
So right now, are you concerned that if someone did put up a wind tower, a windmill?
I am not.
You're,
I'm not at all. So
you're not concerned about that?
no, I am not. But I think they should know how it's going to be taxed. It should be defined, is the only thing I'm saying.
Yeah, I think that's a separate question than what we're dealing with here, so, but I don't disagree with you. I think it would be good to have the answer.
When they get a permit for it, that's where they'll find it out.
Well, I'm not sure that that's clear now.
Well, they should.
So that's what I'm trying to say. I'm agreeing with you, Roger. Yes, they should. So that's what I don't see that mechanism.
Yeah.
You know, that's a question, Wade, that we could ask Amy to let us know is, if someone is in the permitting process to put up a building, or a wind tower, or solar panels, or a manure digester, or any of these things, is there any disclosure at that point as to how that affects their property taxes? I believe, Mark, that that's the point you're really driving at, right? I mean, and that's something kind of separate from our discussion here, but if that's something that Ag and Rural thinks should be part of that process, we could first off start by asking Amy whether it is part of the process.
Yep, I can ask the question, sure.
Okay?
Okay. Anything else on this section? If not, Randy, do you have anything? You've been quiet.
No, nothing at all. Just listening, taking it in. Thank you.
Okay. All right, I'll turn it back to Wade then.
Yeah, so then I'm on the top of page 8. Again, change 3. I think we've discussed this change. Something new, but again, I think something that this committee is really behind. And again, that's just this idea of if something is created on the farm, there could be an outlet for selling or distribution of that commodity, that egg commodity. Excuse me. So again, I think fairly straightforward, but certainly if any thoughts or comments, would be happy to hear.
What's the difference between a roadside stand and a retail establishment? You're selling to the public at both of those.
Yeah, a roadside stand would be just, kind of your family, your corn stand, on the side of the road on the honor system. A retail establishment would be something, maybe a building. Think about Apple Garden where they're selling their products in there. I don't know if you've been up to Sassy Cow Creamery, but
Yeah.
what is that, Columbia County, just north of the Dane County line. They have a little dairy store where they're selling their ice cream and their milk that they produce on site. So I think we're talking about a matter of scale, kind of a standalone facility that allows for that distribution of egg products.
And a farm stand could use a building, say, one of their buildings as the shelter for it, but it still is a farm stand. Is that correct, Wade?
Yeah, I think roadside stand is an older term. I think there's a little bit of a blurring line between a roadside stand and a retail establishment, but I envision a retail establishment as just a, kind of upping the scale of what a roadside stand would entail.
Would your retail be open more than a farm stand? Per se, I can think of a sweet corn stand in my neighborhood, and then a sweet corn operation's a little larger, that sells in the driveway, but it's out of the building. They're very
Yep.
similar. I just want to make sure that we're not creating a trap there for them.
Yep, no, you're right, yeah, and again, this is a conditional use, so there will be various reviews and approvals that an applicant would need to get for this to happen, but really, again, we're trying to open up the toolbox here to egg landowners to really help them create, diversify their incomes from egg properties, so.
I agree with that. The existing ones that we have now, are they required to get a conditional use? Even though they've been existing for, in some cases, 55, 60 years?
You mean like roadside stands or other places?
A roadside stand.
No, roadside stands, again, we're excluding them, those are,
Well, that's fine.
Yeah, the roadside stands are permitted.
Yep,
yeah.
And a retail establishment, something
Exactly.
more than that is
yep. It would be
conditional.
open more, yep, I understand.
So we would look at, like the Stoneman sweet corn operation, we would look at that as a roadside stand.
Yep,
Yeah, okay,
very good, thank you.
all right. Any other commentary on that section?
I just have one comment about when you put that processed part in there, now, they got to be subject to certain regulatory standards. That's outside of this, that would be put on the conditional use,
Right,
as far
so
as.
again, this is just a catch-all saying it could be a raw product, it could be a processed product, or it could be what we call value added, which is kind of this next step of processing. But if you go down to the next change number 5, that's where we talk about if somebody is looking at a processing facility that they need to distribute, to have a retail, we are requiring that's a conditional use. So there are, so you're right, George, there's all, federal and state guidelines, requirements that aren't, that would apply to anyone that wants to do processing, egg processing. But then we also have as we're currently proposing, you guys would see any proposed processing facility as well in terms of it being a conditional use. So yeah, there would be all sorts of,
Yeah, I appreciate that clarification. Yeah, that's directly what I was thinking about.
Yeah, I think one of the big things that we would need to look at too in determining whether we would approve a conditional use for something like that is this something that can be done outside of the urban service area, or does it really require, municipal water and sewer? That's probably one of the primary things that we're gonna look at, and if we feel that it doesn't, that's gonna
Yeah,
be a
that's
consideration.
where it would be, is it gonna be ag zoned or commercial zone?
Well, and where it's
as far
going to
as
be, I mean, whether it can be in an
size.
ag-zoned
Yeah,
area, right? Otherwise, it would potentially need to go inside the urban service area if we determined that this was something that really could not be accommodated outside of the urban service area. I think we're recognizing, though, that a processing facility such as making apple cider out of apples does not need urban services, and there's no problem with it operating, but it should be something that is allowed or at least a conditional use, in our ag zoning, or that we'd like it to be. I think is what we're saying.
well, I think it would matter too in the scale that it's done at too. If it's a larger scale requiring larger facility,
Sure. That's right, and that's why it's a conditional use, so anything that would be coming in, we would take a look at.
Thank you.
Anything else on these with regard to these changes?
maybe one last one. So I think we covered 3, and then we did skip down to 5 as well. I just want to quickly expound on 4 a little bit. So again, just to clarify, what we're saying here is that as of right now, we're capping our ag entertainment attendance in the ag small district at 150 people. Again, what this change would propose is saying, as a conditional use, again, a use that would require city approvals, you could have more than 150 people under an ag entertainment use on an ag small lot. So again, I think something that expands the toolbox for ag landowners, but also provides enough oversight by the city to make sure we're not, creating nuisances or conflicting uses in our rural areas.
So if Willie Nelson wants to come here and do farm aid, he's got to come in here and ask.
Yeah, well, he could already do it on ag exclusive, but he just, or actually he could do between 150 and 500 on ag exclusive without a conditional use. And then if it's about 500 on ag exclusive, he would need a conditional use. But yeah, this exactly right. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Any other discussion on these items? We have one person who'd like to speak, Jeff Schleicher, 3491 LaFleur Court, Verona. Jeff?
Yeah, thanks, Ed, and everybody else for giving me a few minutes. I'll be brief. Won't repeat myself from previous weeks, but Wade in his packet, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Had provided a little bit of information about some wedding barns in other parts of the state, or I don't know if it was just Dane County or not. Specifically, the one example that is probably what my focus on would be this field reserve in Pleasant Spring. It's very similar to what our own wishes are, but I was happy to see that, a town like the town of Pleasant Springs was obviously willing to make some changes, and they thought it was a good thing for their community. Couple things which perhaps you folks don't remember or realize was that when the comprehensive plan was being developed, there was a community survey done, and again, not scientific or anything, but there was a lot of positive support for wedding barns. And as a result of that, the comprehensive plan was worded specifically to allow a wedding barn. Page 437, section 2.3.4 allows uses in ag zoning that are integral to and which maintain the rural landscape. And Sonia specifically stated that the intent of that language was to allow a wedding barn because of their rural character and because the barn and the agrarian landscape was necessary. while at the same time that wasn't opening the door to just any commercial development or entertainment centers. And I think that recognizes the unique status of wedding barns. Obviously, they're not growing crops, things like that, but you can't have a wedding barn if you're not in the country. So my fear is reading what you folks are looking at is that the proposed definition of ag entertainment would result in the exclusion of wedding barns. And I would hope that Fitchburg could at least keep the possibility of a wedding barn, a door open for that, much like Pleasant Springs did in approving the rezoning for this Fields Reserve facility, recognizing that appropriate ag entertainment such as a wedding barn is a benefit to a larger community, that it can be controlled through deed restrictions or conditional use permits. I know some of you were entertaining the idea of using more of existing barns on an occasional basis, which is fine, but I would suggest that allowing for new construction, which is subject to building codes and review procedures, et cetera, results in a much better end product than the uncontrolled use of existing structures with fire hazards, egress and exit issues, ADA noncompliance, et cetera. The two thoughts specifically with what you're looking at here is, I mean, you could simply add wedding barns to the list of ag-related conditional uses. I mean, that would allow for it to happen, but only with very specific approval by the city. Or I guess I would question here in the area of ag entertainment where it's suggested that the entertainment must be an accessory to a principal agricultural use. I guess my question is you define principal agricultural use, but how do you measure that? And I raised that a little bit last time is, okay, if I've got 40 acres and I'm tilling 30 of them, does that mean that a wedding barn on the other 10 is not the primary use? And I guess I throw that out there just for you folks to think about. But if that's not the intent, I guess what would preclude someone from coming to you and saying, well, look, I'm using 30 acres for growing corn. Why can't I use these 10 acres over here to put up a wedding barn? So that could be a way that you allow a wedding barn, or if that's not your intent, I think you've got a little bit of lack of clarity there in your definition of a primary use. So I leave that with you. I'd hope the committee would at least not recommend an ordinance that closes the door on wedding barns and at least allows for its consideration of a newly constructed wedding barn within certain parameters within the city of Fitchburg. And I would certainly, in the course of your discussion here, entertain any questions people had of me. Otherwise, obviously, it's your floor.
Thanks, Jeff. Any questions for Jeff? Wade, would you kind of go over some of the information, some of the research that you did on this?
Sure. Yeah, thanks for the reminder. So yeah, on page 9 of your packet, and this is kind of based on some research other staff has done over the past couple of years, but we did kind of do a perusal of various quote-unquote wedding barn venues throughout the region and the state. I do want to clarify, when folks use the phrase wedding barn, that can mean a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. It can mean, using an existing barn that's used for ag most of the time, converted on weekends, 3 weekends in the summer for weddings, or it could mean a standalone, non-ag, rural event venue. So again, there's a big spectrum when people use the word wedding barn. So I think what this memo does is show you some of that broad spectrum. To Jeff's point, the Fields Reserve in Stoughton area, it's located in town of Pleasant Springs. It is under Dane County zoning. What I do want to point out with this example is the county recognized that this use is not essentially ag, that they rezoned it to commercial. You know, traditionally in Fitchburg, we don't rezone our rural lands to non-ag uses with the exception of our rural residences. So I think that's an important distinction with this case. And you can read through some of that, but that's pretty much what the Dane County staff report, you know, I'm paraphrasing their interpretation, but that's pretty much what they put forward. And then they did deed restrict it to essentially, again, restrict it to kind of the wedding barn, you know, wedding barn business, quote unquote. Then just moving into a couple other ones, you know, there is one in Jefferson County, the Bennett Barn. I can't recall if this was, you know, rehabbing an old ag building or development of a new. And then there's also one up in Barron County, up in the state's northwest. And again, what this did is I think it rezoned a portion of the lot where the quote unquote wedding barn is located to a kind of a business district, again, recognizing that it essentially is a commercial use. And then they classified it as a commercial entertainment facility. So again, I think at least the first and the third examples are kind of understanding that distinction between agriculture and a more commercial undertaking. So I guess that's kind of just a quick overview of some of that information.
Wade, are you familiar with, and I've not seen it, not driven over there. My understanding there's one in the, well, it could, I don't think it's town of Dunn, I think it's town of
Madison.
no, it's Blooming Grove, I think.
I think it's done.
Done.
Is it done?
Yeah.
It's gotta be right on the edge,
It's under construction, right, Mark?
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard of that anecdotally. I don't have any information on that. You know, knowing the town of Dunn, I would be very surprised if there isn't some truly ag entertainment angle to that facility, meaning it's somehow related to a broader ag use. I could be wrong, but just knowing what I know about, you know, the way that town is pro farmland preservation. But no, I haven't seen that one in person.
I'm not sure, but I don't believe it's town of Dunn. I think that's right on the edge. I think the actual facility is in the town of Blooming Grove. 'Cause
And Mark,
that's where
that
they
would make
meet.
more sense in my head, just knowing what I know about town of Dunn. Yeah, if it's in Blooming Grove, I could certainly see that.
I'm pretty sure that's right on the edge.
Maybe it is then, because that's a weird location over there.
Yeah, that's where 4 townships met.
Yes.
Town of Madison, Fitchburg, Dunn, and town of Blooming Grove all met in that corner. That was the,
Wade, are you familiar with the Art in the Barn on Adams Road?
What was it, the Art in the Barn?
Yeah, on Adams Road?
I think I've heard is that in Fitchburg or is that
Yes.
south of Fitchburg?
No, that's Fitchburg.
Oh, I guess
They've had a lot of almost weekly entertainment there with art displays, and we've been over there for a barn dance. I don't know, you know, they usually have a large annual event with gypsy swing bands.
Is that essentially a working farm, quote unquote working farm, George?
They've got a horse stables up, large horse stables up in
yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
But I just wonder how they're able to do that too, because, you know, as far as, you know, if you're looking at all the safety with sprinkler systems and all that, I don't really know where they stand with that, but
Yeah,
it's pretty
assume
popular. It's very popular.
we're aware of that, our zoning administrator, but yeah, we can look into that, sure.
I've got a question. Why can't we find a way to put this in as a conditional use, wedding barns? What's stopping us from doing it? Why can't we do that?
A decision, I'm just trying to lay out what I understand to be the desire of the committee per the direction at the last meeting, our previous precedent with policy. So this committee can decide whatever they want. I'm just proposing a recommended change based on previous committee discussion as well as existing city policy.
I guess my point being is, and this, we need to give this some thought, but do we not want to pass up an opportunity for this type of agricultural type, if you will, venue for the city, both from, maybe from an economic value to the city? I mean, I understand that we certainly can write into it, different regulations and everything that we want to go with it. But can't we as a committee come up with something to make it work? I mean,
You're
we're trying-
proposing, Raj, as a conditional use as opposed to a permitted use, correct?
Conditional.
Doesn't make a difference.
Well-
Yeah.
Oh, no,
Well, I'd go
big
conditional use, because with,
Okay.
yeah, I'd go with conditional.
Because the ag entertainment, the list of items under ag entertainment that Wade put together,
Permitted.
those are permitted uses. So,
That's how it should be.
so if the idea is to incorporate and leave some opening for a wedding barn, I would think we would do that as a conditional use and not a permitted use,
It opens up for clear discussion and parameters.
so that we could look at each individual
Right.
situation and determine
Right.
whether it's appropriate or not.
If I could just interject, I think the real crux of the argument here is the definition of ag entertainment. If we're considering a quote-unquote wedding barn ag entertainment, I would argue the proposal that's been bandied about over the past few months would not meet that definition. I'm not the zoning administrator, it's not my call, but that's, I think, what the definition is identifying. So I think the real question here is what is the committee's desire on the definition of ag entertainment? And again, this is the black is the existing wording, the red is the proposed change. Now, what I would point out, very, very important wording in this definition is farm-based, a farm-based activity that combines the elements and characteristics of ag and tourism, accessory to a principal ag use, and then the last phrase where it lists potential activities, and it says similar activities which are related to agriculture. So again, I think that's if there is interest in allowing this broad definition of wedding barns, I think the committee's work starts with the definition of ag entertainment.
Fair?
That sounds good.
So, I guess the question is whether that really is, I would not consider it to be ag entertainment anyhow, either way, but it doesn't mean it couldn't be something that, I guess I don't know how it would be, even the conditional uses are all ag-related that we have here, and this really is not. So I'm a little puzzled as to how to incorporate it without opening up the door to unintended uses.
Do you think conditional use will do
Your point,
that?
Ed, if the committee feels that a wedding barn doesn't qualify as tourism, let's put the ag thing aside. I think you're really talking about a rural event facility. If you want to really get down to parsing a definition of a proposed use.
Yeah, I guess I would question if a haunted barn is ag-related.
Well,
Again, I think
when
the
you put
idea is
that
that
word
the
in
haunted
there.
barn, 350 days of the year, it's supporting agriculture. And then for a month out of the year,
I see.
it's something else. So I think, and that's really where this wedding barn concept originated. It was used, remember Scott's point at last committee meeting was he was to these barn dances and, once a month they clear out the barn, the working barn, and they have events in there. That's how wedding barns started. They've evolved to something different, and that's fine, but again, the definition of ag entertainment in our code is really about agriculture.
Wade, I have a question for you. Mary Ann McKenzie's facility, what is the zoning on that?
I believe that's a conditional use under ag exclusive, A1 or AX.
I think so.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, she's growing specialty crops. I think when you talk about ag use, I don't think there's any question there, what she's got going on. She does have an event space, but certainly is supporting a broader ag use.
I'm very supportive of it. It was just a question as to how we had zoned it, because I wasn't clear in my memory. Because if I were looking at putting in a wedding barn, I would broaden my perspective and make sure that it was agricultural related all the way through, that wasn't the only function it did. And
That's the point I was trying to make, Mark. Exactly right. Yep.
Well, I think, I'm sort of leaning without a whole lot of looking into it, though, but I kind of like the idea that maybe using this and putting this in a conditional use gives us flexibility to put parameters on it. And instead of, I see what you're saying, Wade, by putting it up there under the entertainment section. I think we need to have a little opportunity to have a little stricter ideas on it. And that might occur under conditional use. Just a thought.
So Wade, as drafted for ag entertainment, if a wedding were held in an existing used dairy barn that was used generally and then cleared out occasionally for a wedding, is that something that would fall under ag entertainment as we have this drafted? Because there's two different questions, whether you would allow something like that or whether you would allow a dedicated facility that is strictly for that purpose.
Yeah, to your former question, again, I'm not the zoning administrator, but I don't want to speak for her, but I think what you described there would be a very reasonable interpretation of an ag entertainment use. I think that follows the purpose and intent of what this definition was trying to get at.
So as an example, a place like Apple Garden, which is using the barn for agricultural purposes, if they clear it out now and then, they have the barn dance, or if it's a wedding, whatever it is, that could fall under this. But that's not a facility that was built dedicated for that purpose. It's secondary to the primary purpose.
Correct.
Okay. So that, Roger, really that type of event could occur at an existing facility.
An existing facility, right.
Yep. So then the question becomes, do we want, in some manner, to make accommodations for a facility that is primarily for this purpose in ag zoning, which, two of these other uses that Wade researched are commercial zoning or business zoning.
Right.
They're not ag zoning.
Well, yeah, Ed, I think you got the right idea there. There's two different ways of presenting this type of entertainment. One, like you say, the barn is used for something cleared out for a weekend or special event. That's ag entertainment because it's basically income-producing ag product on that facility. What I'm saying is that I think it's important for us to maybe consider the other way, too. I think we need them both in here. And that's where I'm coming back, and with what I'm thinking right now, although it could change, that's, again, I think that's where the conditional use can come in for, AX or small or traditional, any of those.
So your proposal would be to include
Right.
a wedding barn type facility operation as a conditional use. So it would be not in the list of ag entertainment, it would be in the list of, although it's not even ag related, I guess. I'm not sure where you'd put it.
Yeah, that's the thing, I
I
don't,
mean, Wade's got a list of conditional uses that are ag-related, such as an ag dealership, research facilities, grain elevators, that type of thing. I guess, Wade, if we were going to look at that, is that where it would go?
Well, I guess to me, the first question in my head would be, does the committee want to consider that type of use? Ag
Yeah.
entertainment, or let's say option A is it's an ag entertainment use. Option B is it becomes its own use and is termed something like a rural event gathering facility.
I
Because,
think that's the way
you
we.
know what I mean? Because right now, under conditional uses, we are already allowing ag entertainment uses of more than 150 people at one time. So maybe I'll just stop there. But do people understand the distinction I'm trying to get at? Is it ag entertainment or not? And then if we figure that out, we can figure out where it would make sense to be housed.
Entertainment, wouldn't you think?
Well, it's a self-sustaining entertainment.
Yeah, I would
Not
think
related to-
I would think it would have to go in under entertainment.
Yes.
Okay, so if that's, and I'm not saying that is the committee's desire, but if that's the desire, then we need to go back and rethink the definition of ag entertainment. In my opinion. Or if the committee thinks that any wedding barn proposal under the sun that might come before them meets the definition of ag entertainment as currently proposed, then we're okay.
No,
But if
I do not.
not, then we need to rethink this definition.
But I think it has to go in under the entertainment part of it, but it had to be clarified. And I think we have to get away from calling it wedding barn, it more of an event facility is because,
We'll cover it.
you may have other things that could go on there. And if you're gonna fall into the agricultural part of it, you should have other things that are ag specifically related in the uses of that structure.
I got a question. If you put it under ag entertainment, when we put something under ag entertainment, can we put criteria on it?
Yes,
Yeah, if it's a conditional use, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
If you put it up under the ag entertainment category, but I'm confused then, does conditional use come into it? Or when you put it into there, does wedding barns have their own criteria?
So maybe some clarification. I'm on page 7. So right now, we are considering an ag, I'm on letter D, under ag accessory. So we're considering, as a permitted use, they don't need a conditional use. Any ag entertainment that has less than 150 people at one time during the day. So let's just say there's a wedding barn, quote unquote, with 100 people, max attendance. Right now, that would be a permitted use, assuming we keep a wedding barn under the ag entertainment definition. And then if it basically goes above, so now I'm moving on to page 8. And this is where we break things out between our big ag district, our ag exclusive, and then our smaller districts. So if that wedding barn has more than 500 people at the wedding, then we require a permit if it's an ag exclusive, or we require a conditional use. If it's an ag small, that has more than 150 people, then we're also requiring a conditional use. So I guess what I'm getting at is, depending on the size of the gathering, as currently constructed, that's what dictates whether or not something is permitted or conditional.
So it's probably safe to assume that a facility that was built primarily for this purpose would have gatherings of more than 150, therefore would, well, then it wouldn't, I mean, then it would come under conditional. In other words, where you have the conditional uses listed at the top of page 8, the place you would put this would be K, right after J. Is that right?
So if we're taking this out of ag entertainment,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because if
Yeah.
it's in ag or entertainment, it's permitted. If it's something
Right.
that we don't want as a permitted use, but we want consideration of it as a conditional use, then it would go under the conditional uses and it would be K. So that wouldn't affect the definition of ag entertainment. This would be another use that would conceivably be allowed in ag zoning.
That could be allowed, yeah.
I
but this-
really largely agree with that.
I'm sorry.
I really largely agree with that, Wade. I think we just need to go ahead and leave our definition of agriculture entertainment alone.
I agree with Amy.
I do too, I agree. I want the flexibility to make decisions on what's going to happen to it.
And how it's worded, I think we have it. I think it's good. It's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, particularly for permitted use, I wouldn't want to open it up anymore.
Absolutely not.
No, no.
Agree.
Could I make a motion?
Yes.
Sure.
I would like to make it a motion that we keep our definition of agriculture entertainment exactly how Wade has it proposed here.
Do we have a second?
Second.
If I just interject, I'm sorry, but would it make sense for the committee to just, you want to vote on all the proposed changes, or do you want to do them one by one?
Well, that would make sense. I'll reword my motion, Wade, okay? I would like to make a motion to approve all changes in red on the agenda packet.
Second.
Any further discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, that is unanimous.
Now,
Now,
Now you get your,
Roger, now we need to talk about an entertainment facility. Where, do we, if we want to allow that, where do we put it?
I like what Amy's headed at. I like it under the conditional use area. And I would propose that that's where we put our efforts on discussion on that.
I can live with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think, Ed?
if we're going to put it somewhere, that's where I would put it.
Okay?
I don't want it to be necessarily called a wedding barn, I don't think. I think we need to be sort of,
The event facility.
I don't know.
Yeah,
So we can do other things, agriculture there, I don't know, I mean,
and I'm really not, and I mean, we're not here talking about Jeff's project tonight, but I'm really not in favor of construction of new buildings for these purposes. However, I wouldn't want to exclude the possibility of a property that's on a heavily traveled road, county highway preferably, where you're taking an existing barn and you're going to do something like this, and that barn would otherwise, be gone, and it's really honestly just going to be used for that purpose. It's not going to be used as a dairy barn anymore. There's nothing,
the cows are gone.
yeah, right, maybe we want an ability to consider that in the future as a conditional use. Certainly not as a permitted use.
Would it be similar, you're speaking of, to what Mary Ann McKenzie did?
Yeah, something like that, but,
I mean, she used some of the existing structure and added to that,
yeah,
bring it into compliance for the codes.
right.
I guess I would have a question on that. With a construction background, I don't see any reason why, especially with all the falling down old barns, why it wouldn't be advantageous to take one down and reconstruct it in a new location. Now, I think that would make it a safer barn, and you could make it look just the way it did when it was originally built as an old, back in the day. But how you do that, I don't know. That would be, how you put any kind of restrictions on how they, that would be a police and fire safety setup. But you're gonna have to do that with a new barn or an old existing barn.
You're correct.
I would chime in on that, Ed, also. And I understand where you're coming from, but again, if you look at Fitchburg right now and the number of existing places that might work, yeah, they're out there, but we're limiting ourselves on location when we have to go and find an existing building.
Yes, we are.
And
And I think we should be.
I'm not sure that's to the best interest of the city. And as far as location planning, I'll give that some thought.
Well, at some point, we'd like to wrap this up and send this on for, I guess, where does it go next? Council consideration, Wade, is that right?
I think, if the committee gives you direction, I would debrief with planning staff, and then I think it would likely go to plan commission as recommended by this committee. And then I think, ultimately up to the council.
Okay.
Well, if you put it as a conditional use, those decisions as to where it might be allowed can be made later. And we could also have plan commission weigh in on that and council weigh in on it too. And maybe someone else wants a kick at that.
So that'll give us the flexibility we're talking about, put it in conditional use?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
some reference to it.
At this stage, I think that's the place to put it, and then we can come back and work on the criteria
Yeah.
later, but at least for right now, for pushing it up through the system, why, that would work.
Is there any objection?
As far as the criteria goes, I mean, you could make any new barn look just like an old barn by maybe using a certain percentage of old barn boards or old beams or, the stone, any of that. Like, you look at the Dunn Farm where you took a heritage barn down there and they reused some of the stone for a new church. Now, that's totally different circumstance, but they reused some stone and probably some beams in there too. But I just think that's a good use for it.
Well, I could support a K with in event facilities in the rural area.
Sure.
I have a statement.
Yes.
Ed?
Yep, Randy?
Yes, I would support a K, and, either way, new or old, whatever the case may be. My biggest concern is, it's already been brought to my attention, and I mentioned it at the last council meeting, was the example is on East Clayton Road. The new facility, the new barn that's in the town of Dunn, where I believe it's the town of Dunn. And Mark, you referenced it earlier, but it's the traffic. Those are the issues that are important, at least in my mind, are important to the constituents of Fitchburg. And Ed, I think you mentioned earlier, as far as on a main highway, versus a rural road, where suddenly the traffic for the events suddenly increases, or if there's alcohol provided, then it becomes another issue. And those are the issues that have been brought forth from the constituents of Fitchburg to me. So those are all things that have to be weighed in. So if that falls under conditional use, so be it. So,
Yeah,
just want to make that comment.
It would be.
That would be one of the conditions that could be put on it, Randy. So,
Very good.
and there would be several conditions, traffic being one of them. Capacity, your septic and water, in the Mary Ann McKenzie situation, that's a sprinkled facility. And she used the existing silo to sprinkle it. So that's a classic example of what was done.
I have a question for you, Ed. You're on the planning commission. We put this in there under J, and it gets to your planning commission, and they see, that becomes a discussion. Are they gonna wanna know all these details that we have not put together yet to either approve or disapprove that new line item?
Well, I don't know, because if it's a conditional use, any conditional use also comes to plan commission. So if there were an actual proposal to do one of these, each one of those individually would come to plan commission anyhow to look at. So but I think we just need to clarify what we envision. In other words, if it's an event facility, is it something that is architecturally designed to fit in with a rural landscape? I mean, is that what we would want to say is an event facility designed to fit in with a rural landscape? Is that,
Ed, I just want to interject too, something that I would expect to see would be that the primary use around this facility is still for agriculture use. I mean, I think that's really important to me. If you're putting up a new facility, I want to see a pasture cattle there. I want to see a cornfield. I mean, I want to see some agriculture still happening. I mean, like I mentioned last meeting, I don't want to see 30 acres of blacktop on the farm field when I'm
Right.
driving through rural Fitchburg. I want to see the corn if we're going to have something out there.
Good point.
Well, that's going to put us into an acreage size.
Well, you can, again, I'll go back to what Mary Ann McKenzie did.
Yeah.
By the driveway she put in, she then didn't have to put in the large blacktop parking area that Amy was speaking of, because parking is allowed along the driveway. So there are ways around it.
So how do we word this?
yeah, that's a good question. Amy, you bring up a good point. I'm not sure how we fit that in. You could, with that definition, exclude a smaller parcel from being used for this purpose, or exclude the CSM being done to sell off that facility for its purpose to someone else, separate from the rest of the farm. Maybe that's the intent. I'm not sure. We got to kind of figure out how we would
If I
incorporate.
could just maybe interject as well, and I think that's where the ag entertainment definition was trying to provide some guidance on what these concepts could look like. I mean, I think if we're talking about a new use, let's call it a rural event facility, in my head, that deserves a definition of what that is.
Okay?
You know what I mean? Just my 2 cents. But then I think what you could do is create some parameters for what that use would need, but also allow some wiggle room in the conditional use process.
Do you have any thoughts on, Wade, on how you would draft this?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would start with the ag entertainment definition as a base and then just try to tweak it to capture, what I'm hearing from this committee. But, if there is a desire to, again, have it, be farm-based, it could look similar to an ag entertainment definition with just some minor tweaks.
Well, can I suggest then that you maybe take some time to draft that and just send it around by email and have everyone kind of respond as a straw poll? I guess I'm not sure how we want to, I don't want to have to keep coming back. And at some point, we'd like to get this off our plate and move it on. What do you think of that, Wade? Just draft something and send it around to everyone and just have everyone respond. If there's any material objection to it, we'll take it up at the next meeting. If there's no material objection, then we can send it on to Plan Commission.
I would just ask folks, I'll do that. I would just ask folks if you do want to talk about it, respond to me individually, either via email or we can talk over the phone, but we need to avoid what's called a walking quorum. So we need to have people respond to me individually. So, yeah.
Yeah, so don't copy everyone on your response.
Okay.
All right, so I think we've approved everything else that we've looked at here. We've given staff the task of kind of drafting an item K for an event facility that would fit in with the rural landscape, but still be part of an agricultural, part of a farm, I guess. I mean, there has to be an agricultural aspect to it also in the surrounding area.
Viewscape.
Are we in agreement on that? All right. Does that make sense, Wade?
Yep.
Okay. All right, sounds good. Wade, I don't think there's anything else on this topic. Are we,
Yeah, I guess maybe just kind of wrapping or summarizing, yeah, so I will work on a revised definition of like a new definition of like a rural event facility, send it around to folks, hopefully we'll get some consensus, and then if and when we do, I will package that all to our other planning staff, and then we'll talk about taking it up the flagpole to Plan Commission, and then I will keep the committee informed as that discussion evolves, but those are what I see as the next steps.
okay, sounds good.
And then just do keep in mind, this body is an advisory body to the Plan Commission, so there is a potential that the Plan Commission might diverge from what this committee recommends. I'm not envisioning that, but just a heads up.
Okay, sounds good. Let's move on to agenda item 5B.
Yep,
Thanks, Jeff.
yep.
Thank you, Jeff.
Item 5B, purchase of development rights programs.
Maybe just a time check. Ed, I don't know if Scott Yarborough is sitting there, but Scott, when do we need to get out of this room for the next meeting?
You still got a good 45 minutes to an hour.
Oh, gee whiz.
Oh, there isn't is there a 6:30 meeting?
6:30 Plan Commission.
30.
Okay, got it, okay.
Wade, why don't we start, you had done some work on a PDR program in Rock County in a previous
Yeah.
life and provided us with some information that I thought was very instructive. And this is a topic that Mark in particular had requested that we put onto our agenda for consideration at some point. And I guess maybe even before we get into the staff discussion, Mark, I mean, this is really something that you have brought up a number of times. You want to kind of take the floor and talk about what you envision or why you think this is something we should be looking at.
Well, I think we have to look, if we're seriously going to look at 50 years or 100 years, what do we envision the city looking like? Is it all apartments? Or is there at some point in time a area that is permanently left as open space? And, and everybody is going to differ on that opinion. Basically drawing a line. And that I have my own opinion on that, and I've done that to a certain point with our farm, where I've tried to restrict what can be done with it. Govern from the grave, some have accused me of, but it restricts some of that. And what does the city envision? I was here during incorporation. We did not envision what we have now. I can tell you that. The people that were there did not envision that. They envisioned some area that was restricted and be able to control that. But it's grown way beyond that. So what does the rest of the people here feel? Because the only way you're going to restrict it is by purchasing the development rights and making it a permanent line.
So that's an interesting question, because you can restrict it in that manner, or you can restrict it as we have been doing with zoning and use of identification of a FUDA. Now, the FUDA is not necessarily permanent, whereas the development right purchase would be more of a permanent solution.
My point exactly.
Yeah.
And what I see is I want a permanent line. I want to know that my grandkids will be able to enjoy the open space and not, to use their terms, have the city ruin it. Those aren't my words. Those are some of my family's words. And I'm still catching guff from the old farm that was in our family because it developed. Some of my family members have taken me to task at great end because of that.
Because it was developed?
Yes. So even though it wasn't all my doings, I guess I'm the last one left alive, so I get the blame. So, anyway,
Well, everyone in this room here represents a family that has been here for a long time. You know, we've kind of to a certain extent fought these battles in approving the FUDA and laying out a longer-term plan than the 20 years that was required by state statute. So it gives us a guideline as you know, as to what the future could look like. It's a matter of whether we want to make certain that that vision is maintained, whereas there are a lot of people who instead want the flexibility to change that over some period of time. Now, this is a way of doing it. We looked at, and you were here, Mark, we looked at transfer of development rights, a slightly different version of this, some time back, and that was opposed by everyone, including the people that it would have benefited.
it was.
That had a different structure for how it would be paid for. Purchase of development rights specifically is paid for by the greater community in some manner. The money has to be raised in some manner to do this. And, you know, and Wade can kind of go through his research here at some point with us too, but I think if we've all read this, one of the things that Wade has identified is that when he did this in Rock County, there were a couple of different sources for those funds. One was federal and one was state. And neither of those sources exists at this time.
At this time.
Not to say that it will never exist in the future. So if you don't have those sources, it pretty much would have to come from city taxpayers.
And I think everybody here realizes that at this point in time, we don't have those funds. But it doesn't mean that we can't move towards a permanent structure.
So that we have a plan in place should those sources of funds become available at some point in the future.
And that we seek those funds, even though we're denied, and then approved. Town of Dunn did it, and
Yep.
did it well. And some people say that, well, there'll be an island. Well, it's gonna be a pretty nice island, I think.
It,
At the time that the town of Dunn.
were they able to receive
Yes.
state or federal?
They were, yes.
And what they did, as I understand it, is they strategically only purchased the rights along the edge of the development they were trying to prevent. And so in other words, if you owned a farm that was right on that line, that's what they purchased. If you owned a farm that was elsewhere, they did not purchase your development rights because essentially that prevented anyone from annexing through.
On the first round, you are 100% correct, Ed. Now they've began to purchase stuff in that second and third tier.
Oh, they have?
Yes.
Okay. How are they funding it now?
Part of it's funded through a small amount of the taxpayer. And then they constantly are looking for funding.
Okay.
And they've been successful over the years, but Ed, we looked at the exact same thing when we were a township. We looked at purchasing our border to stop the annexation. We looked at that. That was one of the options that was before the town board. That was one of the options, to buy a strip across, all the way across.
So if the city had not been created in 1983, that may have been what the board would have attempted to do instead.
That was one of the options, yes.
Okay.
That was one of the options, and Town and Dunn did that, and basically they did the same thing. So, anyway,
Mark, I agree with you on this. I am in favor of looking at this. If, I don't see how it can work now, but we could put ourselves in a position where we have something that would work in the future. And I think that, that what we have to decide as a body is, whether we think we should do that and send this forward for, for consideration to Plan Commission and Council. I'm in favor of it. I'd like to hear what other people have to say.
I'm definitely in favor of it. I think that really kind of, if you step back and I think of the sole reason why I'm even on this committee or had an interest is definitely for the preservation of agriculture in Fitchburg. I mean, that's something that's really the most important to me. So I'm totally 100% in favor of this. And I don't want to see our farmland high-rise apartments from heaven. I hope I'm going there. That's not what I want to see for a family farm that's been in my family for generations.
Would there be any leverage because Fitchburg is a city versus township? I mean, we're like the only city with the largest amount of acreage in the state, right?
Yeah, my understanding
as far
is,
as looking ahead
yeah, I think
for any grants or any,
for grants,
well, I don't know, for funding, whether it be state, federal.
I think that there just isn't any right now. I mean, that's what Wade's research is telling
Right.
us, is that those
Right.
funding sources,
I see, yeah.
they're not there now, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they won't, they've been there in the past, they could come back. And you also have conservation easements. I mean, there are, I believe that's what happened with the Paisley property, was it was sold, and then there is a conservation easement on that too, so it did not come from taxpayers, but rather from another group. So, I mean, there are other ways of accomplishing
yep.
the
All
same thing.
I'm asking is that we try to explore all of those ways and make it available to, the information available, and we go towards that goal.
So George, are you in favor or not in favor of that?
Oh, I'm in favor of it. Looking at what possibilities we could do moving forward. But I don't know where it is right now. It doesn't seem like there's the option right now.
Yeah.
Because of you're putting it on the city tax roll.
But if there were a way of funding it, you would be interested in moving forward with this idea?
Sure.
All right, and I'm just kind of moving to the right, so I guess Randy is next. Randy, what are your thoughts?
I had some technical difficulties and I was cut off and didn't hear all of the discussion, but based on what I do see and I'm reading, I would be in favor. Yeah.
Okay, Raj? Oh, Scott's here too. Scott, I'm sorry, I wasn't aware that you were in. I didn't see you up there. Go ahead.
Been here the whole time, Ed, come on.
We should have done roll call at the beginning.
Oh, no, he's been there how long?
see his thing, just not his face.
He's been on secret patrol there.
Yeah.
What do you think, Scott?
No, I wholeheartedly agree with everything everybody else has said, and I think that's what is so unique about Fitchburg, is being able to have the agricultural area and then be able to go into the urban area.
I'm sorry, can I
So
stop you for a minute? Can someone put whatever they have on mute, because we're getting some feedback of something or other? Wait, go ahead, Scott, sorry.
No, I was just saying that I agree with everybody else has said about how we need to have the distinct difference in our city, because that's what's so unique about it, having the agricultural area, then being able to go into the urban area for the entertainment and things, so I agree. I don't know financially how it can be done, but it's at least worth looking into.
Okay, thanks. Raj?
Well, I'm in favor of including it because I think it's important that we be proactive instead of reactive. Too many times something's come up and we have to scramble to get it on the books to make it work. We're thinking far ahead here, and I think it would be good to add to our zoning one more tool in our zoning toolbox to keep Fitchburg's landscape the way we want it.
So in light of the comments from the group, Wade, and I think I think everyone's had a chance to read what Wade put together. Wade, if you want to just kind of maybe we've all read it, but for the purpose, for anyone who may be watching on television, just kind of summarize what your experience has been and what the roadblocks might be, and whether you think, from a staff standpoint, that, based on where we're going with our FUDA, whether this is something that could make sense to develop for future use for the city.
Yeah, so about 10 years ago, I had a little bit more hair, but not much. But I developed a similar program for Rock County, just south of here. So what I did is given my experience developing that program, given what I know about the city being here 8 years, I tried to identify some issues that I really think the committee needs to think about as we evolve with this discussion. And then I also included various documents that I put together kind of describing how the program was developed and how it was to be implemented. So basically public education pieces for for the constituents in Rock County. So I think from those documents, you probably get a sense of the scope and the scale of what it takes to develop a good program. And not to toot our own horns down there, but the program was recognized as being, won some awards. It was recognized as being very proactive, very progressive. And if I was part of a process here, as staff, I would push for the same thorough process. But to that end, maybe I'll just quickly summarize kind of my bullet points in the first page of the memo. Point one, I think traditionally, and you guys know, I think I'm a straight shooter, and my background is environment preservation. But I think if Fitchburg proceeds with this, it's going to be unique. There's a lot of moving parts here that make the city unique that we need to really think about as we go down this path. The first being that normally PDR programs are essentially a defensive mechanism. So normally a rural town or county, i.e. Town of Dunn, Rock County, would develop a program to try to protect their land base, their ag land base, from annexation from urban, suburban type city and village development. So that's a really unique dynamic here, is that essentially the city is protecting the land from ourselves, if you really want to think about it that way. Mm-hmm. And to that end, I think, and it was mentioned earlier, we do currently have tools that protect our ag land. We have our zoning and we have our future urban development areas in our comp plan. I think where the real crux of the issue lies is how strictly do we adhere to our comprehensive plan and our FUDA areas. So that's, I think, just big picture point one. Moving more specifically into that idea, number two in my memo, I think, to develop a program, a solid program, there would need to be what I'll call a PDR plan. Just like we have a comp plan with FUDAs, I would advocate for a PDR plan with specific areas of farmland that we want to protect. For both that plan, that PDR plan, and the FUDA plan to be effective, there needs to be a level of commitment from the city to adhere to those plans that I've not seen in the current past. And what I mean by that is, if we develop, let's say, a PDR plan and start to buy easements in that area, and then all of a sudden we change our FUDA plan to go in a different direction near those areas, all of a sudden our FUDA plan and our PDR plan are working at cross purposes. So the idea is if we develop these two contrasting plans, an ag preservation plan and a development plan, to really respect taxpayer dollars and staff time and city officials' time, we need to follow those plans 100%. So I think that's another unique piece of a Fitchburg program that you don't see elsewhere. Number three, to that point, you know, this wouldn't be a farmer get rich retirement program. This would be, for this program to work, and what I understand the goals of this program to be from what the committee's told me, you could get a lot done with a few strategically placed purchases of developments. Because what you essentially do is if you are real strategic in your planning, you create barriers to development where everything to the west or south or east of that barrier, you're not ever likely to see development. So again, this wouldn't be, you know, this wouldn't be available for everyone. This would probably, for a program to be really solid and efficient, it would be available to just, you know, some select landowners. Point number four, I think I touched on it, but, you know, in my opinion, to make a really successful program that responsibly uses city resources, we would need to have a substantial commitment from this committee, probably the Plan Commission, and our planning department as well. So I want folks to keep that in mind. Point five, it's been talked about already. You know, these easements. So, and just to back up, so a PDR program, the mechanism to protect farmland is what's called purchase of development rights. Once those development rights are purchased, a conservation easement is placed on the property. So that's a legal mechanism to protect the property, a conservation easement. To Ed's point, a conservation easement can be bought and held by either a city government or a governmental unit like the city of Fitchburg, or it can be bought and held by a nonprofit conservation group, commonly called the Land Trust. So when Ed talked about, you know, Paisley's easement, I believe that was acquired by a local land trust called the Groundswell Conservancy. And certainly there could be partnerships between the city and those groups, those organizations, to really, you know, efficiently advance common goals. But I just want to point out, you know, some of those details as well. To point number six, you know, again, it's been discussed, but back when I developed the Rock County program, there was a state program called the Federal FRPP, I forget the acronym, but basically they would cover 50% of acquisition costs. And then at the time, that was when the state had just released their Working Lands Initiative under Governor Doyle. They also had a 50% match program. So the idea was local governments could go to the feds for 50% of acquisition cost of an easement, and then go to the state for the other, and then the easement would be fully funded, and the only cost to local governments would be essentially staff time and, you know, various administrative costs. Those programs, the state program went away basically 2 years after it was formed, when the new governor administration came in. It's not yet been restored. It's still statutorily on the books, but it's not been funded over the past, let's say, 8 years. The federal program, I just did some research. I didn't realize that program has also went away. I don't know when that happened. You know, maybe with the new administration that might come back as well. But again, currently there are no, to my knowledge, no funds out there to cover acquisition costs. Now, to that point, both of those programs were competitive. They were comparing applications across the state. When we did get some, our Rock County applications did get funding, but I do want to point out, if those programs came back, they would be competitive and we would be judged against probably the rest of the state. Now, to that point, to my earlier point, you know, I'm really curious what a grant awarding agency would look at when they look at Fitchburg's program, because on the one hand, one of their prime criteria in awarding grants is protecting land close to development. I think we'd score very well there. But the flip side of that is the land is within our own boundaries. So I could also see an argument that they would say you guys can protect your land without an easement. So I think that's an interesting dynamic as well. And then I guess the last point, number 7, is, again, I just want to point out that the long-term ramifications of easements. So traditionally, when a entity buys or acquires a conservation easement via purchase of development rights, that easement is a legal document that runs into perpetuity. Perpetuity isn't really a legal term, but essentially it means forever. So that land is locked up, to Mark's point. There are scenarios that I'm aware of where those easements have been reversed, but they do require a lengthy legal process, fees involved. And I guess where I'm going with that is, as a planner, I've been in this business for a while. Our goal is to create plans that are solid, that that governments follow and adhere to. But I also realize there are situations where those plans need to be deviated from. So what I'm trying to point out is this idea of city putting time and resources into acquiring easements, and then 30 years from now, there's a whole new, none of us will be here probably, or at least, on these committees. And there is a new direction at the city, and there's interest from the landowner in the city in reversing perpetual easement. So I just want to point out that issue as well. So those are all things, again, just from my experience, both previous to Fitchburg and with Fitchburg, that I think we should really as a body be conscious of. And then I just included various fact sheets on, again, program development and implementation. Gives you, again, kind of a sense of the work involved. And just the last thing I want to point out, so this was the end product of all our work. This essentially is our program plan. And what you see here in kind of the green is all these areas that were eligible to apply for the program. But then the areas in kind of the darker colors, those are what we call our priority acquisition areas. And our thought was those areas scored very highly on a system we developed, and that's where we were going to focus our acquisition efforts. Again, we're not going to acquire easements anywhere and everywhere. We were going to focus our efforts on those specific acquisition areas. So with that in mind, that's my spiel. Again, can certainly answer any questions or take any comments the committee might have.
Well, I think if it's the desire of the committee to move ahead with something like this, one approach would be to have Wade put together a kind of a 10,000-foot summary of what PDR is, how he would envision it operating in Fitchburg, and send that up the food chain from ag and rural. I mean, we take a look at it and make sure that it says what we think we want it to say, and find out whether it's got any legs. Because I think that's where the battle is really going to be. I mean, there is clear to me that there are many people who are interested in developing as much of Fitchburg as they possibly can. And we're going to hear that from the development community and from council members. So, this is not a small thing to recommend moving forward with, but it also does not make sense for Wade to spend an enormous amount of time on this until we find out whether there is a political desire to consider something like this. And I guess that would be my recommendation, is that Wade, you put together something more of a brief summary saying, here's kind of what it looks like, here's what it does. There's no funding source right now, there could be in the future. Ag and Rural is interested in doing this. What do you think, Plan Commission? What do you think, City Council? What do you think, Economic Development?
Any value in looking at other areas in the county, what their temperature is on this?
Cottage Grove had something at one time.
Yeah,
When we were looking at
they have a
TDR,
program, I believe.
what's that?
They have a TDR, a transfer program. I don't know at what level they've implemented it, if at all, but I know they have one on the books. Yep.
The transfer program that we looked at in the past was very different, because rather than having the having the purchases funded by by the state and federal government, as Rock County did, or by the taxpayers, as we would have to do if we did it right now. It was proposed to be funded by areas that were getting developed. So in other words, if you're going to develop a particular area, you need to purchase additional rights to increase your densities from the rural areas. We went down that route. It seemed to make sense to me and to some people, but boy, a lot of people didn't like it. And even the people who would have benefited the most from that were against it. I have no interest in going down the TDR route again. And I am very doubtful that PDR is going to get very far, which is why I don't want to wait spending a lot of time on it. But it looks like we've got everyone on this committee who cares about the agricultural area, who thinks it's a good idea. At least it should get on an agenda somewhere, right?
It's worth a shot.
Well, just a point. When we did the FUDA, and I thought it was done very well, the thing that I didn't feel they did that they could have done is they could have asked the citizenry more questions about preserving the agricultural land per se. And I don't think I feel that wasn't done, that wasn't as clear an option for the people in the FUDA as it should have been.
That's a good point. And I think in the discussion at that time, the term urban growth boundary was used, and we did not establish one. I mean, we did establish a FUDA, but it can be changed. An urban growth boundary is something that theoretically cannot be changed, that could be created with or without PDR. But there was not sufficient political interest in going the route of an urban growth boundary.
And it was not presented at the FUDA very well.
Yeah, it wasn't really presented to the public as
If
an
had
option.
that been an option, had every citizen that attended those meetings been given the option to voice an opinion on that, whether there should be a permanent ag area and the growth should be locked in, I think the outcome would have been quite surprising.
Wade, how does this fit into the comprehensive plan? Do we identify the area and then some way or other get it into the comprehensive plan, or is that not necessary?
Right, and that was kind of to my earlier point. So maybe let's use the map on the screen as an example. So this is actually Rock County, this is Janesville. So let's say the light gray is the current city of Fitchburg boundary, right? See this darker gray?
Yeah.
Let's call that city of Fitchburg FUDAs, meaning those areas we want to develop. And then let's say this yellow and red is our PDR area. I think what I'm getting at is, and then in our comp plan, if we don't want to be buying easements in the FUDA area, right? And we also don't want to be having our FUDA ultimately change and go into the PDR areas. So again, for this program to, in my mind, to work, we would create a PDR area, just like we have FUDA areas. And then that would go into, our comp plan as like, this is our land use Bible, and we will follow it. Because if it's not in the comp plan, it really doesn't have any legal weight or political weight. And then you're going to start, having a FUDA plan and a PDR plan that essentially are working at cross purposes. So.
Yeah.
Well, if we were to get this done and accomplish, Ed, I don't remember what you called, help me remember the term.
Oh, urban growth boundary?
Urban growth boundary. Then the planning department has a very clear message that they work from that boundary within redevelopment of what they have, and they did a good job in the FUDA about redevelopment. That was very clear, and the people were very, correct me if I'm wrong, Wade, the people were very interested in redevelopment.
Yes. You mean in the most recent comprehensive plan update?
Correct, yes.
Yes, very interested, yep.
So, but what we didn't do, we didn't address, and I did speak about that, is the people weren't looked at as, weren't really given a clear option of option Z, no development. And I had a problem with it then, I still do. And I think had that been an option for every citizen that attended those meetings, the outcome would have been quite surprising. So we have a beautiful place, one of the most beautiful places in the country. And part of it is the contrast. I don't want to see us ruin it. So.
No question.
So anyway, that's kind of where I'm coming from with it. And it has to be a fairly permanent line, so.
Randy, did you have a question?
I do. If there is no funding currently, federal, state, that you reference, where does this go from here? Other than plan and city council for discussion, is there any teeth to it? I mean, is there?
Well, if I could just interject on that, I mean, years ago, a older planner gave me good advice. He said, you come up with the vision and the plan, and then you find the funding. And that's essentially what we did with the Rock County program. But, you know, I think to Ed's point, I mean, to me, the first step is, does this thing politically have, is there interest from the right people that make decisions here at the city? And if there is, and if, you know, then I would say, you know, proceed with a strategic plan, develop that plan, and then, you know, me or whoever else starts pounding the pavement trying to find funding sources. You know, another thing to think about here is there is an opportunity for landowners to donate easements. I'm not saying that's what would happen in Fitchburg, but there are many examples throughout the state, and that's essentially how land trusts started. They were just shoestring nonprofit organizations that were interested in protecting land. So there's a tax benefit to a landowner to donate a conservation easement. So potentially, and then, you know, there would just be a covering of staff costs. But there are scenarios where landowners do donate development rights to land trusts or a government. So this thing, you know, there's potential for a no-cost easement.
The other question I have is, who challenges, from your experience, who are the folks that challenge? Is it a family down the road that would like everything reversed?
Oh, you mean like
back and to develop? Who's the one? You know, I mean, they've got to have some dollars up front for the legal challenge. I'm just curious, or is it a developer?
You mean like trying to get an easement overturned?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, I mean, I think a likely scenario would be, you know, an heir, let's say 2 times removed from grandpa or whatever, you know, and they see dollar signs.
Sure.
For development, and they have again, there is a legal course to get these things reversed, but, you know, I don't ever see a government or a land trust being the instigator of trying to reverse something. But again, I've never been aware of a city that's quote unquote kind of protecting land from itself, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Again, normally it's these rural governments that are protecting from the urban governments. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I have a question. You were saying that we tried this PDR before.
We tried TDR.
TDR, okay.
Transfer of development.
Yeah, I got the T and the P mixed up there.
Yeah, and it would have made, it would have added another layer of cost and bureaucracy to development of land within the FUDA.
Okay.
So essentially, that was the primary reason that it failed to, achieve support. But I think that it's interesting that, including Scott, there are a lot of us here that represent old families. But at that time, the rural community who would have benefited through the sale of the rights was against it then because everybody wanted to develop. Everybody wanted to make sure that their farm was going to be able to be developed. And that was one of the other reasons that it
Well,
went nowhere at that time.
yeah, I guess I didn't see our side of it wanting to develop. But I was just curious as to also when you said that Cottage Grove found funding somehow through developers.
Well, I'm not sure.
And
Yeah,
to me-
that's what they did with it. With a transfer program,
Right.
the developers had to purchase additional development rights to increase their densities. So
And-
you would
and then
go,
was-
you would go to a farmer and purchase their rights so that you have more density on the property that you're developing.
And
That's
was,
how a
Fitch-
transfer program.
and at that time was Fitchburg had talked about that, but was against it because of, it wouldn't encourage some,
It would have made it more
Development. Would have
difficult
made
to
it
develop
difficult.
land in Fitchburg, because that would be
Right.
another thing that a developer would have to do. Where do I want to develop land? Do I want to develop in Fitchburg, or do I want to
Yeah,
develop
and
in
they
Middleton?
were being
Gosh,
turned
Middleton would
away
be much
and-
easier.
yeah, I remember that. It was it was pretty difficult for any developer to want to come to Fitchburg and even talk business, yeah.
Right. So you don't have those issues with a purchase program. But the problem with the
Right.
purchase program is you don't have the funding source. The transfer program had the funding source, but a lot of people didn't like it. The purchase program doesn't have, at this point, doesn't have the funding source.
We didn't have the comprehensive plan in place either when we were talking about transfer development rights. No.
Current one was not in place, but there was a plan before that, Raj.
There was the 95 plan, I think, was in place, right? But
I mean, we've had a
but the
plan.
longer term, the one that looked out 50 to 75 years,
Right.
Yeah.
I think it was before that.
Yeah. But just remember, I've got a comprehensive plan from 1970. I've still got a copy that shows the
Yeah.
part that's developing right now was in our 1970 plan. I have a
Sure.
copy of it.
Sure, yeah.
So there was, okay.
But those plans didn't attempt to look out further.
No,
It was the 2009 plan
Yeah, that's
that looked
That
out.
looked out further.
the one I was referring to.
Yes, and that was the
Exactly.
point at which, everything was done to establish the FUDA and the agricultural area, but no one wanted to draw that hard line, which it would be the urban growth boundary. And so that's what there would have to be the will to do. And that's where, again, if we establish an urban growth boundary, and I don't know how because we didn't do it, I don't know how you could do it and make it permanent. I'm not sure what the mechanism is for that. Theoretically, I don't know whether you could do that without purchasing development rights, or whether you have to do the PDR in order. I think that was the idea, is that you had to do the PDR and buy the properties along that boundary.
You do.
If I could just interject, I think the idea is, whenever in land use planning at a governmental level, you can call it whatever you want, whether it's a FUDA or urban growth boundary, but the gist of it is, the governing body can modify or change that at any time they wish. I think what you're doing here is with a PDR program, you're creating a legal mechanism, an easement, a legal land right that is outside of city political will. So that's, I think, the difference.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The,
And one interesting point about that, what you just said, Wade, is, theoretically, if the city were willing to jump over the area that has been purchased, and not develop as we have in the past, where it's been contiguous development, theoretically, unless you purchase everything, the city could in the future still just jump it over and just leave this band of undeveloped area.
But that's where I think if you're really thorough with a PDR plan, you do an analysis where you look at, what could service development with gravity flow, what couldn't. So again, I think you could create a strategic plan that would, with, you know, a few easements, you could really inhibit development. But I mean, to your point, you're right. You know, think about the Oregon, you know, rail corridor, right? I mean, that's kind of an example where, as a city, we're just so unique and we can really potentially develop non-contiguous areas. So, yeah.
Well, I just want to point out that my dad's original farm was zoned A1 exclusive, and we tried to restrict that through the zoning department. And the city of Fitchburg changed that zoning. We were against it, and they did it anyway. So, and that's still a bitter pill.
Okay.
All right, so I think we're short on time. We need to wrap up. I think in general, I think we've got agreement that we would like to see this fleshed out a little bit. Wade, I think we don't want to see you spend a lot of time on it, but could you put together kind of a summary of what this could be, how this might work, what the purpose would be, and you know, and just so that everyone really understands the ramifications, and then if there is an interest further up the line in exploring this, it can come back to us and we can flesh it out.
Yep.
Okay? Thank you. All right, I think that was the last item on the agenda. Is there a staff report or any announcements?
No report.
We don't have anything else coming up, I don't think, agenda-wise. We probably don't need a December meeting, or do we?
Not from my perspective. We still might get some applications coming in, but I'm not aware of any at this point, so.
A lot of times in December,
no
we don't
need.
meet
Yeah,
specifically.
Ed,
yes.
I have a meeting coming up with Mike Zimmerman's group later this week. They've been on vacation, but remember at our last meeting, we talked about broadband? And what Randy and I are thinking of is, I think, Ed, you commissioned us to do something on that, is that want to sit down and visit with them and get some parameters on broadband. And then as a kind of a game plan, we would make a report here to this committee. And then if we feel that we want to pursue with that, then I would entertain that we would bring in some people that are involved in establishing broadband to talk to us and get more detail on whether or not we want to move ahead with this. And I would suspect that's going to take, you know, a meeting or two. So it'll be down the road a bit, but wanted to let you know that Randy and I are both working on that and follow up on it.
Roger, just a question. That's specifically broadband into the rural areas which are unserved at this point in time.
That's exactly,
Okay,
that's
thank you.
exactly it.
So,
Good idea.
Wade, let's assume that, that we've got both of those items perhaps for a January meeting, that we'll take a look at what you put together for PDR and get a report from Wade and Randy with regard to broadband, and then just see whether there are additional items that pop up. If we don't need a December meeting, let's skip that then and go to January. When's the, this would be the third Tuesday in January, do you know what
I
that
guess
would be?
I'll just throw this out there. I'm fine with the January meeting, but just given my workload in the new year, if the committee is open to waiting till February, I would not disagree with that. Again, January is fine, but I'll just throw it out there.
So if nothing else comes up, I don't think either of these items are urgent, so.
No.
All right, February 15th is the third,
16th is the third Tuesday.
February 16th.
Yep.
Sorry.
Okay, so February 16th at 4 o'clock. Unless something else comes up that we have to address, would be the next meeting. Okay.
Okay.
Any other announcements?
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.